Welcome to the Man Cave Podcast with Dan Casper.
What up, everybody? Welcome to this episode of the Man Cave Podcast, brought to you by Hy-Vee and Toyson Ford. Dan Casper here with you, as always, for every episode of the Man Cave Podcast. We're going to talk a little football here today. It's a Tuesday. March, I'm getting my days mixed up, March 5th, so it's the deadline of franchise tags, but it also means next week we've got free agency, new league year. So as kind of a little free agency primer, I'm going to start to kind of do a little bit of scouting reports or kind of touch on some of the potential free agent targets that the Green Bay Packers could take a look at. So I'm going to go through a few safety names coming up in the second half of this podcast. But I want to lead things off talking some Brewers because I got a question about Freddy Peralta. Do you think he's a little bit of a wild card player? Not, and maybe the term wild card is open to interpretation too. So I'm going to get to that. But first, Milwaukee Bucks with a big win against the Clippers with no Giannis and no Middleton. They get the honors to start this episode of the Man Cave Podcast. Damian Lillard leading the way for the Bucks. 41 points. Was a perfect 13 of 13 from the charity stripe. Also 4 of 9 from deep. Played 42 minutes in last night's game. And Bobby Portis coming off the bench, playing 30 minutes. Double-double, 28 points, monster on the boards, 16 rebounds. No Giannis. Middleton still out dealing with an ankle injury. Kind of no problem. Holding the Clippers to 106 points. Bucks able to get it done. Had a little comeback there, down at one point 11, double-digit points in the second half there. But able to outscore the Clippers by 15 in the fourth, 40-25. 40-25 in the fourth quarter, and pick up what I think is the most impressive, best win in the shortened Doc Rivers era thus far, but perhaps one of the better wins all season. I'm not going to say best, but one of the better wins all season for this Bucks team this year because you didn't have Giannis in here, you didn't have Middleton, and to be able to come together in the Clippers, one of the better teams in the West. I know they're kind of a popular pick to come out of the West by some people because maybe not sold yet on the Timberwolves for whatever reason. I know there was a lot of that chatter around the All-Star break. I think Barkley was one of them, but essentially it came down to which one do you trust the most, younger teams like OKC or maybe a little inexperienced from the Timberwolves yet, or a team like the Clippers. I don't know if I'm on that side yet, but nonetheless, going up against Kawhi, Paul George, James Harden, without your top player, without Giannis, and still picking up the win, uber impressive, super impressive for this Bucks team. And I think that's one reason why I think if you're a Bucks fan, you should be pretty pumped about last night's game. That you're missing two of your better players. Middleton's still dealing with that ankle injury, and no Giannis, who's dealing with tendonitis in his Achilles. Hopefully it's not something that will lead into something bigger. Knock on wood. But to be able to miss those two guys and still pick up a W against a very good team, you got to be feeling pretty good. Because I'll be honest, if this game was in December or November, did the Bucks win it? I guess never say never, but I wouldn't feel pretty confident about it. Heck, I wasn't even confident before the game started when you found out Giannis wasn't going to be playing in last night's game. But you got to be feeling pretty good now, and that is the reason. Last night, that game was a prime example. Was the reason why you make a move like the Bucks did to acquire Damian Lillard. Last night's game was that reason. No offense to Drew Holiday, because last year he did it a couple times. Last year, when there was no Middleton or no Giannis, Drew Holiday had a 50-point game. But we know Holiday isn't known for his offensive firepower. He's a defensive guy. Very good player, one of my favorite players of all time. But is he a guy that can carry your team? Probably not. Damian is a guy who can carry your team. And that's why you make a move like the Bucks did this offseason to acquire somebody like Damian Lillard. Because if Giannis is out, who's the next man up? Who's your guy? Do you have another guy that can carry that load? Bucks have it now with Damian Lillard, and we saw that last night. That is another reason why, if you're the Bucks, or if you're a Bucks fan, you got to be feeling pretty good. You're feeling. I think the stock is trending upward about your team right now. But that was a fantastic win for this Bucks team, and I feel like too they're starting to get a little swag back. They're starting to get a little swag back. I don't know if any of you saw some of the video clips out there. I mean, you've got Patrick Beverley, Bobby Portis, two guys who are, we know, very emotional, very pumped up, getting the crowd riled up last night. But it just feels like they're getting a little bit of their swag back, whether that's because of Doc Rivers coming in, whether that's just because maybe guys are a little bit more comfortable within the system, or whatever have it. But they feel like they're starting to kind of get their mojo back here a little bit too. Big win for Milwaukee last night, which starts off a huge stretch of games coming up here for the Bucks. You got Golden State. You've got the Lakers. Clippers again. Sacramento. West Coast trip coming up here. Those are your next 4 games. Golden State, Lakers, Clippers, Sacramento. Then you're back home for a couple games against Philly. Phoenix is on there. And then, not to look too far ahead, but it's kind of hard not to right now. March 20th. Circle it on your calendars, okay? March 20th. At Boston. Boston right now is 1-11 in a row. They just annihilated Golden State on Sunday. Hutsy had that game on the TV, and I'm like, dude, this is over with. And it was like halfway through the second. I mean, that was a beatdown of all beatdowns. I don't watch too many Boston and Golden State games, but watching that one, because my 6-year-old wanted to watch it, that was a huge beatdown. And we know Boston's cream of the crop right now. The easy favorite to go to the NBA Finals, probably to win the NBA Finals for many. To get through the East, you're probably going to have to get through Boston. It's going to have to go through Boston. They're going to get the 1 seed. And this will be, well, they got one more coming up. So we got 2 more games. Milwaukee's got 2 more games against Boston. That last one might be a little interesting, too, because there might be a case where that in that final week of the regular season, Boston might not just, they might have everything wrapped up at that point in time and maybe just be very cautious with some minutes to their players and such. So, I mean, this game coming up on the 20th might be the better indicator, might be the better litmus test, if you will, between Milwaukee and Boston. But I can't wait for that one. And that's on the road in Boston, too. It's, to me right now, if I'm looking at this, Cleveland's young and talented. New York is up there too. But if this is the way the Bucks are going to play, since we've seen them post All-Star break, going out there undefeated, getting it done on the defensive end, other guys stepping up offensively, this is going to be the Eastern Conference Finals between the Bucks and the Celtics. Mano y mano. This is what we want to see. This is what NBA fans want to see. Bucks fans probably don't want to see it because, it'll get a little bit of an easier matchup, quote unquote, but you know what I mean. But hopefully they can continue this, because I feel like this is going to be, these next few weeks, these next couple weeks, this is what we are going to, we're going to get a really good sense of how this Bucks team is going to look once they get into the postseason. What kind of team are we going to see? Starting to play on a more consistent base, complementary basketball right now. Next up for the Bucks, as we mentioned, Golden State. That game will be tomorrow night, so travel day today. Hopefully Giannis. Doesn't seem like it's too big of a concern right now for Giannis. Went through his pregame ritual, did cut it short a little bit last night to see if he could try to get it going, but from all accounts out there, not too much of a concern at this point, it seems like, at this point in time. So, again, hopefully it just doesn't develop into something. I know this is something he's kind of had off and on throughout the season and such, so doesn't feel like, at least from what we're being told, is too much of a concern at this point. And it sounds like that Chris Middleton is getting closer. Getting a little bit closer. Although Doc Rivers has been saying this for how many weeks now? Like a couple weeks in here. So, whether, I don't know what his definition of closer is, if he just keeps continuing to tease us and such, but hopefully he'll be here in a little bit. It'd be nice if he's going to be with the team on this West Coast trip. Because I want Middleton back on that court. I want him to start. He's missed some time here, and I know whenever he does get back on that court, they're going to ease him on in. They're not going to all automatically probably give him 30 minutes a night. And they're probably going to put another minutes restriction on him. But I feel like for the Bucks to get to that Eastern Conference Finals, and if it is against Boston, and for this Bucks team to beat Boston, Middleton, one, has to be healthy, but he's got to be ready to go. Middleton might be a wild card in this whole thing. We know what to expect from Giannis. We know what to expect from Damian, right? And we kind of know other guys' roles on this team. Wild card in this thing, if they go up against a team like Boston in the postseason in a 7-game series, Middleton might be that wild card player in this. We need good Chris Middleton. And I want him to get some. First of all, I want him to be 100% healthy. That's priority number one. But he's got to get some games under his belt before this postseason run here too. Get back in basketball shape, get into a little bit of a rhythm, get into a little bit of a flow. That's what I want to see. All right, speaking of hoops, we've got the latest AP poll rankings that came out in the college basketball world as we are getting set to wrap up the regular season here. Just a couple games left here for both Marquette and Wisconsin. Marquette, though, falling a couple spots, and they're in the latest rankings down to number 8. They fell down 3 spots after their loss to Creighton. Creighton moving up a couple spots in there, but Marquette has a chance to potentially move up. I would think a few more spots if they can upset UConn in Milwaukee tomorrow night. Number 2, UConn. It's going to be a tough task for the Huskies, but Marquette's been a kind of a weird team to follow. I mean, they were playing some really good hoops after that, getting dominated by UConn. And I know you're looking at schedules, it's like, well, look at who they beat and such. And then they went on that stretch after their loss to Butler earlier in the season. I think when you look at UConn, when you look at Marquette, maybe one of the questions is going to be for maybe some naysayers out there, and I don't know if it's been too much of a topic right now, but let's say UConn goes and plummets Marquette again. I kind of wonder if that narrative is going to start to peek out about, well, can Marquette beat anybody that's good? And I don't think that's necessarily fair. I mean, you got to play who's on your schedule. And when you look at earlier in the season, they did beat Creighton. They did beat Kansas, although that was at the beginning of the year still. They did beat Illinois. But I get this weird feeling that there's going to be some out there that if Marquette gets dominated, I don't think, maybe it won't come out there if it's like a close loss or anything like that, but if Marquette gets dominated again by UConn tomorrow night, I kind of wonder if that, maybe it's the Twitter narrative or the social media narrative or whatever it may be, is going to be a little bit hard on Marquez. Like, well, who have they beaten? Who have they beaten? But when you look at the rankings here, Houston in your one spot, they didn't move. UConn did move up one more spot. They flip-flop spots with Purdue. Tennessee holding strong at 4. So you would think right now, with Selection Sunday coming up in less than a couple weeks from now, you'd think those would probably be your 1 seeds. Maybe an Arizona can sneak in there at some point. They're at 5. Iowa State coming in at number 6. I feel like Iowa State is one of those teams in college basketball that are, for a lot of fans, like, Iowa State's in there. And when you look at it, I mean, so far this year, Iowa State, 23-6. They're second in the Big 12. 1 game back from Houston. And when you look at the Big 12 this year, you got Houston, you got Iowa State, you got Baylor, that's 3rd. BYU's in there, Kansas, Texas Tech. Big 12's gotten some quality teams here this year. But I feel like Iowa State's that team when you look at the rankings or when you're following college basketball, it's like, oh crap, they're that good? They're a top 10 team. They're just outside the top 4 because you got North Carolina behind them, Marquette, Duke, teams that we've heard about all season long, a little bit more higher profile college basketball teams, although Iowa State's had some good years. Shout out Tyrese Halliburton and such. But I feel like Iowa State's right now that team in college basketball that for casual hoops fans or for college or for casual basketball fans, they're just like, oh, man, didn't realize they're that good this year. They are. The Cyclones, man. And they got BYU coming. BYU 20th in the country. And they finish up against Kansas State here. So, shout out to the Cyclones. Got a couple of, I think they got a couple of Wisconsin representatives on there too. So, we'll talk some Badgers. Badgers are going to be going up against Rutgers on Thursday. So they've got, and then they finish up against Purdue. But right now it ain't looking like they're going to get to that 20-win mark for the regular season here. Now it's all about kind of Big Ten positioning in the Big Ten Conference Tournament. Are they going to get the double bye? Or are they going to get, triple, whatever? How many buys are they going to get here? Kind of what they're playing for. But, I know it was on Saturday. What a scene at the Kohl Center beforehand, though. Howard Moore returning to the Kohl Center since that tragic car accident where he lost his daughter, lost his wife. Obviously, he's still, recovering, but, being wheeled out in a wheelchair from his former teammate, Adrian Griffin. And it's just what an emotional scene before the game. I mean, that's an example, too, where some things are a little bit more important than sports and such, but what a moment to see him out on the court. Badgers, unfortunately, not able to pick up that W against Illinois, although they battled and it was close up until the last few minutes and such, but doesn't right now maybe look like Wisconsin's going to get to that 20-win mark, at least in the regular season here. We'll get RJ's thoughts on that and more Badger stuff, including some postseason hockey with him coming up at about 8:20 this morning. All right, let's take a quick break. I want to throw in some Brewers chat in here, too. I forgot to mention this in the opener here. But something to kind of think about for a little question of the day, if you want to go about that. But, we got opening day coming up on the 28th. We'll be at Hy-Vee. Remember, Hy-Vee 28th, going to have an opening day party. We're looking for, it's also National Something on a Stick Day. So they're looking for some suggestions. If you got something creative, got something fun that potentially they can make for that day, hit me up and I'll forward it on to them. Got a few of you already hitting us up with some suggestions there. But Freddy Peralta, of all the Brewers veterans this year, we've been talking about the youth movement. We've been talking about Jackson Churio, Sal Frelick, the DL Hall coming, one of the youngsters that came across or came with the Corbin Burns trade. But when you look at the veterans on this team, that's a Yelich, that's a William Contreras, throw in Rhys Hoskins, free agent acquisition, Gary Sanchez and such. But is Freddy Peralta perhaps the biggest wild card for this Brewers team for this season? I think he is. I'll explain that a little bit later on here. But I wanted to throw that out there of the veterans, so not of the youngsters. So that doesn't count Jackson Churio. That does not count Sal Frelick, even though we got to see him a little bit last year. I'm talking about like the Wade Mileys, the Freddy Peraltas, the Christian Yelich's, the William Contrerases, Willie Adames. Hey, that might be a really good wild card player in there too. But of all the veteran players that have been with the Crew for the last few years, who's maybe the biggest wild card in this thing? And I guess, wild card can be open to interpretation. Wild card in sense of like, okay, if that guy goes out there and has an all-star year, that's what's going to propel the Brewers to a postseason berth. Or maybe it's a veteran from the aspect of like, I just have no idea what to expect from that guy. I think Freddie is. I'll explain here after this quick break. We are always looking to save a little money in our pockets, but we still need our essentials like our grocery items. So how do you save money while also getting what you need for your family? Hy-Vee Perks. If you shop at Hy-Vee, you're already getting a great deal on quality items throughout the store. But now you can save more money with Hy-Vee Perks on different items each week. Saving some money is easy if you shop at Hy-Vee in Eau Claire. So take advantage of these awesome deals and sales and stop on over at Hy-Vee in Eau Claire today. So there's an article, Brewers.com, talking about Freddie, and one of his goals is to hit 200 innings pitched this year. And when you look at Freddie's career since 2018, he hasn't hit 200 innings pitched. In fact, last year was the most innings he's ever pitched, and that was 165 and 2/3. For comparisons, like 200, Corbin Burns hit 200 once in his career with the Crew. And that was 2022. Almost got it last year, 193 and 2/3. And we know, Brewers sometimes, for a lot of those pitchers, it was like 6 innings. Maybe could have gone a little bit further, a little bit more than the distance. Maybe that was a Craig Counsell philosophy, getting to the bullpen right away and such. But it's definitely a goal from Freddy Peralta's perspective to hit 200 innings pitched this year. And, when we talk about the Brewers this year, a lot of the focus has been on the younger guys coming in. Jackson Churio, Sal Frelick, Garrett Mitchell, Joey Wiemer, DL Hall, Joey Ortiz. Some new faces, some guys that we got to see a little bit from last year. That has been the focus of this team, the talk at least, from all offseason. Yet this team also has a few established veterans. Christian Yelich, William Contreras, I'd throw him on there even though he's still young, but we've seen him now for a couple of years in the big leagues. Willie Adames, Rhys Hoskins has been around for a while too, Gary Sanchez. So we've got our veterans over there. Wade Miley, not incorporating Brandon Woodruff just because we won't see him this year. But Freddy Peralta is also on that list of veterans, and I feel like Freddy Peralta, when we talk about like a wild card player, and again, the definition of wild card can be open to interpretation however you want to view it, but I look at it from my sense of wild card player in terms of really helping the Brewers get back to the postseason. Like if this is a guy who's on and he's playing at a high level, that could be the difference from this team not going to the postseason to a team that is going to the postseason. I feel like Freddy Peralta is that wild card. Now, I think Willie Adames potentially could be that too, from an offensive standpoint in the middle of that batting lineup. But Freddy Peralta being the new quote-unquote ace, the number one pitcher of this staff, jumping up there because Burns is gone, Woodruff is hurt, next man up is Freddie. I think one of the questions out there is Freddy Peralta ready to be that ace, to be a number one starting pitcher? To be the guy that when it's his turn in the rotation, you're feeling pretty darn good that today's going to be a win. Or if you're in a little bit of a rut, the team is, and it's his turn in the rotation, you're feeling like that's the guy that can stop this little bit of a rut. He's always, or I shouldn't say always, but majority part of the time, whenever he's on the mound, we're going to be in a position to win. You're feeling pretty darn good. I feel like if Freddie can take that next step this year and be that guy, be an ace, be a number one starting pitcher, That to me could be the difference whether this team makes the postseason or not. If he goes out there, and it's not necessarily that he's got to go out there and hit 200 innings pitched. That I think that's a good goal. I think that's a goal that also shows that he's been able to stay healthy and he's been able to stay productive. But I feel like if Freddie goes out there and takes the next step in his career, he could be one of the main differences whether this team goes back to another postseason this year, first year under Pat Murphy, or maybe they fall a little bit short. He can set the tone of this pitching staff. If Freddy Peralta goes out there and maybe he struggles or, maybe he's like a 500 type of pitcher, this entire pitching rotation, this starting rotation, I feel like could be in a little bit of a flux because Wade Miley, we know, Wade Miley ain't going to get 200 innings pitched. I mean, I feel like if you get 110, 120 innings from Wade Miley, you're feeling pretty darn good about that. DL Hall, after Freddie and Wade Miley, we're kind of an unknown world. DL Hall, still a youngster, a lot of good stuff out there. Colin Ray, he's an older guy, but we just first saw him last year. I think it's still a little bit of an unknown. Is it going to be Ashby? Is it going to be somebody else? You got all these other kind of unknowns out there. Freddie Peralta's got to be that guy that is kind of your stable, your force at the top of that rotation. And that's why I feel like he's a wild card in that sense. Can he be that guy? Can he be that new number one? Brewers need him to be. Not to put any extra pressure on the man, but he has got to be that guy that can be the new ace for this staff. That's why I feel like that's where I feel like he's a wild card to me. Because if he goes out there and he's an all-star type of pitcher or he is a clear-cut number one, that could be the difference whether the Brewers go back to the postseason or not. If not, if he can't and he struggles, I think this rotation might be a little bit up in the air. Might be kind of a tidal wave to ride throughout the entire season. Offensively, if you want to make a pick, I'd probably go Willy Adames if he's still on the team. Which at this point I kind of feel like he's going to be, but again, I think we all felt that way when Corbin Burns, when we were getting closer to spring training. But if he's a guy, and I know he just had a towering moonshot the other day, but if he's a guy that can boost up his averages and be a little bit more consistent at the plate, I don't know. Maybe we can stabilize that batting lineup. So there's an article, Brewers.com, talking about Freddie, and one of his goals is to hit 200 innings pitched this year. And when you look at Freddie's career since 2018, he hasn't hit 200 innings pitched. In fact, last year was the most innings he's ever pitched, and that was 165 and 2/3. For comparisons, like 200, Corbin Burns hit 200 once in his career with the crew, and that was 2022. Almost got it last year, 193 and 2/3. And we know, Brewers sometimes for a lot of those pitchers, it was like 6 innings, maybe could have gone a little bit further, a little bit more than the distance. Maybe that was a Craig Counsell philosophy, getting to the bullpen right away and such. But it's definitely a goal from Freddy Peralta's perspective to hit 200 innings pitched this year. And, when we talk about the Brewers this year, a lot of the focus has been on the younger guys coming in. Jackson Chourio, Sal Frelick, Garrett Mitchell, Joey Wiemer, DL Hall, Joey Ortiz. Some new faces, some guys that we got to see a little bit from last year. That has been the focus of this team, the talk at least, from all offseason. Yet this team also has a few established veterans. Christian Yelich, William Contreras, I'd throw him on there even though he's still young, but we've seen him now for a couple of years in the big leagues. Willy Adames, Rhys Hoskins has been around for a while too, Gary Sanchez. So we've got our veterans over there. Wade Miley, not incorporating Brandon Woodruff just because we won't see him this year. But Freddy Peralta is also on that list of veterans, and I feel like Freddy Peralta, when we talk about like a wild card player, and again, the definition of wild card can be open to interpretation, however you want to view it. But I look at it from my sense, a wild card player in terms of really helping the Brewers get back to the postseason. Like if this is a guy who's on and he's playing at a high level, that could be the difference from this team not going to the postseason to a team that is going to the postseason. I feel like Freddy Peralta is that wild card. Now I think Willy Adames potentially could be that too. From an offensive standpoint, in the middle of that batting lineup. But Freddy Peralta being the new quote-unquote ace, the number one pitcher of this staff, jumping up there because Burns is gone, Woodruff is hurt, next man up is Freddy. I think one of the questions out there is Freddy Peralta ready to be that ace, to be a number one starting pitcher, to be the guy that when it's his turn in the rotation, you're feeling pretty darn good that today's going to be a win. Or if you're in a little bit of a rut, the team is, and it's his turn in the rotation, you're feeling like that's the guy that can stop this little bit of a rut. He's always, or I shouldn't say always, but majority part of the time, whenever he's on the mound, we're going to be in a position to win. You're feeling pretty darn good. I feel like if Freddie can take that next step this year and be that guy, be an ace, be a number one starting pitcher, that to me could be the difference whether this team makes the postseason or not. If he goes out there, and it's not necessarily that he's got to go out there and hit 200 innings pitched. That I think that's a good goal. I think that's a goal that also shows that he's been able to stay healthy and he's been able to stay productive. But I feel like if Freddie goes out there and takes the next step in his career, he could be one of the main differences whether this team goes back to another postseason this year, first year under Pat Murphy, or maybe they fall a little bit short. He can set the tone of this pitching staff. If Freddy Peralta goes out there and maybe he struggles or, maybe he's like a 500 type of pitcher, this entire pitching rotation, this starting rotation, I feel like could be in a little bit of a flux because Wade Miley, we know, Wade Miley ain't going to get 200 innings pitched. I mean, I feel like if you get 110, 120 innings from Wade Miley, you're feeling pretty darn good about that. DL Hall, after Freddie and Wade Miley, we're kind of an unknown world. DL Hall, still a youngster, a lot of good stuff out there. Colin Ray, he's an older guy, but we just first saw him last year. I think it's still a little bit of an unknown. Is it going to be Ashby? Is it going to be somebody else? You got all these other kind of unknowns out there. Freddie Peralta's got to be that guy that is kind of your stable, your force at the top of that rotation. And that's why I feel like he's a wild card in that sense. Can he be that guy? Can he be that new number one? Brewers need him to be. Not to put any extra pressure on the man, but he has got to be that guy that can be the new ace for this staff. That's why I feel like that's where I feel like he's a wild card to me. Because if he goes out there and he's an all-star type of pitcher or he is a clear-cut number one, that could be the difference whether the Brewers go back to the postseason or not. If not, if he can't and he struggles, I think this rotation might be a little bit up in the air. Might be kind of a tidal wave to ride throughout the entire season. Offensively, if you want to make a pick, I'd probably go Willy Adames if he's still on the team, which at this point I kind of feel like he's going to be, but again, I think we all felt that way when Corbin Burns, when we were getting closer to spring training. But if he's a guy, and I know he just had a towering moonshot the other day, but if he's a guy that can boost up his averages and be a little bit more consistent at the plate, I don't know. Maybe we can stabilize that batting lineup. All right, let's take a quick break and let's talk a little NFL free agency, kind of a Packers free agency primer, if you will, after these quick words. Are you thinking of taking a spring break trip this year? Or maybe you're already eyeing up that summer vacation, but you're not quite sure if you have the proper transportation for those road trips. Hey, that's where Toyson Ford can help you. Toyson Ford has a wide selection of new and used vehicles for you to check out. And at Toyson Ford, they treat you like an honored guest. They will work with you on financing no matter what your budget may be. So if you're looking for that new vehicle this year, head to Toyson Ford, located at 1000 Chippewa Crossing Boulevard in Chippewa Falls. Little NFL free agency primer. Okay, you can go through NFL.com. Greg Rosenthal, who's fantastic at his work, he's always got a nice kind of NFL free agent tracker up at NFL.com. He's got his top 101 NFL free agents. Chris Jones is up there. You got Kirk Cousins and such. And when you look at this, list here, you can look at, it's kind of a wish list maybe for your favorite team. In this sense, for Green Bay, be like, well, yeah, Chris Jones, love Chris Jones. Who wouldn't love Chris Jones on there? I mean, come on. Antoine Winfield Jr. is at number 8. I would love Antoine Winfield Jr. in a green and gold uniform. I would love it. One, I would be shocked if the Buccaneers don't put the franchise tag on him. Adam Schefter earlier this morning said unless there's, barring anything surprising, he's going to get the tag. He listed a few other guys on there too. So I'm not saying I'm going to put him under the category that he is not a realistic option for Green Bay in free agency. But there are a few other safeties out there that potentially could be options that I think could be decent options for Green Bay. Now, there's been a lot of talk about Green Bay. Again, it's that time of year. You got rumors. You've got, smoke screens and all that stuff. So take it with a grain of salt whenever you hear, stuff like this. But there's been talk that Green Bay is going to try to bring in a veteran safety, but also be heavy on the draft and safeties, which I don't think is a big surprise for anybody. Right? That's not a surprise for anybody. So my personal opinion, again, I don't have any inside info or anything like that. I feel like Green Bay is going to try to bring in a safety, a veteran safety, but still maybe even double down on the safety position in the upcoming draft. Whether that's getting one in the first round or maybe day 2s or something similar to how they did tight ends last year. We'll get plenty of time to talk about the draft a little bit later on. But I feel like they're going to target a safety in this free agency class. So who are some potential options out there? The name that a lot of fans are kind of throwing out there right now is Xavier McKinney from the New York Giants. That's probably outside of the pipe dream of Antoine Winfield Jr. That is probably the next name that you hear a lot of Packer fans talk about, that they would like to see Green Bay go and get him. Still young, 24 years old. You look at a lot if you're not familiar with him and you kind of read some stuff and you read some scouting reports on him, you start to really like what you hear. Pro Football Focus, as a free safety, he was graded as an 81.4 in the box, 79.4, top 10 marks among safeties. McKinney's 7 yards allowed per target in coverage ranks top 25 among safeties. His 17 combined interceptions and forced incompletions put him in the top 20. So you hear those numbers, you're like, that's the guy. Especially when you hear Jeff Hafley, the new defense coordinator for the Packers, talk about the importance of that safety position. Wanting a guy that plays with his hair on fire. A guy that can go sideline to sideline. Can help in coverage. Can help stop the run. Xavier McKinney, if he's a realistic option for the Packers, and I don't think at this point why he wouldn't be, but it's going to cost a little bit. He, outside of, if we take Winfield Jr. off, he might be the one guy that gets the highest contract in terms of safeties out there, available safeties out there. So, you're probably going to have to, I saw one prediction about a 4-year, $60-some million deal. So if Green Bay wants a guy like Xavier McKinney, they're going to have to pay for him. they're going to have to invest in him. Going to have to give him a big deal and make him probably one of the top, highest paid safeties out there. That's just the market. We see this every year in free agency. I wouldn't mind him. Now, are there others out there? You got C.J. Gardner-Johnson. Played a little bit for the Lions. Got hurt in preseason or early in the year for the Lions. Spent his first few years in New Orleans. Spent a year in Philly in 2022. Still young. I mean, he was a rookie in 2019. You kind of wonder, could this be a guy? Could this be a guy that you bring in on a one-year deal? Maybe a 2-year deal? To kind of, I don't know if resurrect his career is necessarily the best way to say it because he's still young and such, but he's coming off that injury with Detroit last year, just played 3 games for Detroit. But I kind of wonder, could that be a guy that maybe you get a little bit cheaper because he's coming off that injury? Could that be a guy that if you're looking for maybe a little bit of a bargain, and maybe you're looking for a guy that only wants to do a year, up his value, and hit free agency the following year, kind of betting on himself, maybe a guy like C.J. Gardner-Johnson is that guy. He's available out there. One guy that Pro Football Focus is pretty high on, and Greg Rosenthal, in fact, too. He's got him ranked right behind Xavier McKinney at number 23 overall, is Cal Duger, the safety from New England. Now, he's a little bit of a different type of safety, and I don't know if he would fit in this style of defense that the Packers want to do. He's kind of that hybrid, linebacker, safety. He's bigger. I mean, he's 6'2", 220 plus. Inconsistent a little bit in coverage. So while he's out there, I don't know if he's that guy that fits this style of defense for Green Bay in terms of what they're looking at for safeties. I'll throw a couple more out there. Cameron Curl, Washington, safety. Now, he is a guy that was originally drafted in the 7th round. If you read some of his stuff, again, from Pro Football Focus and such, he can line up multiple spots, as consistent as safeties come on down-to-down basis. And I think was it Greg Rosenthal here too? Let me see if I can bring it up here. But said that, if he didn't have that, quote, 7th round pick on him, like where he was originally drafted, he might actually be a little bit higher. But for some people, yeah. This was from Greg Rosenthal. Curl tackles and covers equally well. Some on-off splits from 4 games that he missed in 2022 also show his value. He originally was drafted higher than if he was originally drafted higher than the 7th round, he'd probably get more hype. Again, could this be a guy? He's going to get paid. But could it be a little bit more of a bargain pay? Because he's got that, he was drafted in the 7th round. How good is he really? Well, maybe you get him a little bit more of a bargain. And then finally, another safety I'll throw in there, Geno Stone from Baltimore. He's a guy, he had an 84.9 Pro Football Focus coverage grade, 7th at the position, 7 interceptions this year. He's a guy, too, that kind of jumped out on the scene this year. And I think he was a name, too, that a lot of, when the Packers were looking for their new defensive coordinator, and we were looking at a lot of Ravens coaches to maybe potentially be that defensive coordinator, you started to hear the name Geno Stone a little bit more. Like, that guy would look awesome. Bring in a guy, bring in the Baltimore-style defense, bring in Geno Stone over here too. The one knock on Stone, though, run defense and tackling. He's got to get better at that. So, outside of Winfield Jr., there are, and I haven't even gone through all the safeties, there's a few more that we could go through, and I'm going to save those for a little bit later on. But there's more safeties that Green Bay could potentially look at. Maybe investing a lot of money into one, bringing in another veteran, and then still drafting. There's options out there if Green Bay wants to bring in a free agent safety. And we just kind of touched on the surface of some of those guys. So we'll hit up some more a little bit later on this week. That is going to do it for us on this episode of the Man Cave Podcast. Again, brought to you by our good friends from Hy-Vee and Toyson Ford. Until next time, I'm Dan Casper. Don't forget to follow and subscribe to the Man Cave Podcast wherever you listen to your podcasts. And if you got a few seconds, if you could, give us a 5-star rating and a positive review so others can find the podcast. I'll talk to you on the next episode of the Man Cave Podcast.